played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
Yeah, boom to the hail, sports fans out there in the sphere, or to you, the individual, as part of this collective. Welcome to the OMSR Gen 5.0 with your brief but very concise host, Will the Alternative ESPN Sports Thrill. Hella rotation on that free throw, along with Dwayne Darn That's Ultimate Sports Fan, your OMSR mascot. Few of the OMSR house cheerleaders, calling them. Stay away from the fraternity references for a while. Got some good stuff on that, more on that for the Final Four themselves. As usual, doing the intro show thingy-lingy-majing, the clip order coming up. The last two where four is focused on. We're going to go back in bracketology. See who was the most accurate here from our, I think our most favorite analysis crew there at ESPN. CBS does a good job too, but let's face it, ESPN, does a lot more college basketball. Alright, so previewing Final Four. I know it's a little late, go ahead and laugh, but Gen 5.0 has taken like over 200 man-hours to try and figure out all the little quirks and establish a paradigm, seriously. 4 different applications just to do the graphics, mind you, at the very beginning. Yeah, many man-hours. All right, so the beauty of Gen 5.0 is from here to forward, get to bring you more show and also more content, but it's minimized. It's all fused together, gets to indemnify the OMSR position. So you may be saying to yourself, well, what does that mean? That doesn't sound necessarily good. I have plenty of highlights coming up. It's called the Will in the Box. Now, what in Helsinki is that? Roll. Wax off to wax on. Yep, down here in the corner, low profile, low drag. Chime in here a little bit till we get to the segue on the Quickie Sport Rant, which is going to be about how this has been a great tournament in the sense of, your last couple of rounds, no upstarts, no upsets, really, except Villanova not being there. You'll see in the videos coming up, highlights rather. A lot of love given to Villanova, even more so than Virginia, and also to Arizona. I don't want to spoil it for you. All right, so try to chime in, between their talking points and then Quickie Sport Rant and rest of the highlights, bulk of them, mind you, after the fact. All right, here we go. Bracketology, going back in the Wayback Machine. All right, so we've got Jay Bill going first.
Playing Virginia, and Virginia will move on to the Final Four. Duke and Gonzaga. And I've got Duke.
You can take the man away from ACC basketball, but you can't take the ACC out of the man.
I think Duke will get a chance to play Kentucky.
I love Virginia. He's been on Virginia for years.
And I think Kentucky is going to cut down the next. Kentucky is the best team. I think the Wildcats are going to win it and go forward,
Coach Seth Green, next.
Kentucky has the ability to defend Notre Dame on the perimeter. I've got Kentucky advancing. Wisconsin, Arizona. Arizona, to me, has a terrific starting five. They advance against Wisconsin. Villanova, Michigan State. This is going to be an interesting basketball game, but I think Villanova spreads them out. I think Dave Shuffles.
It would have been.
And we've got Duke beating Iowa State. Sitting in the stands, guarding the basketball.
That also would have been interesting. I think this might have been the one I was looking at or initially going at. Boy, that's a good looking round right there. No upstarts there. Yeah, when it happens to you, it's one of those things that's like, yeah, I suppose it could happen in the school or schools I root for, from a big conference or whatnot. But that's the sort of thing that happens to the other guy. Yeah, until it happens to you. Got Jay Will.
Wisconsin versus Arizona. I've been saying it all year long.
He sort of deviated from the norm.
for Arizona. Arizona moving on. NC State versus Virginia.
He's going to call it NC State there.
Moves on. Duke versus Gonzaga.
Almost
there. Gonzaga will be too much. Gonzaga
They
moving
were
on. Kentucky versus Arizona. They're down for Indy. Again, Arizona moving on, beating Kentucky. Virginia versus Gonzaga. Gonzaga move on.
You'd be like going,
what?
What do you want, Jay Will?
Gonzaga. I have Arizona winning the whole thing.
Wow, how about that?
Game. He goes with the Wildcats.
You must be something matters. That'll be different.
Spent a lot of those T-shirts. Here's how I see it in the Elite Eight.
All right, Reese.
Kentucky and Notre
Whose
Dame
opinion don't be saying, what do we care what Reese Davis does? He used to just be a college football guy. Now he's like doing everything. You get experience, you know. He's qualified.
In the East region, this is where I think you've got to have one outlier. Michigan State hits the free throws, not expected to get
Got
there.
to see more Villanova love going on there.
Duke and Gonzaga.
Pretty much, yeah, you called Notre Dame there as well. That's interesting. Spot on. Yeah, pretty much spot on here for Reese. So, remember.
And win the net.
I have Wisconsin.
That is, baby.
Like both clubs, but I'm giving the edge.
No, not in older Austin Powers in the U.S. No,
They're very
the man.
athletic. Arizona to march on. Virginia, Villanova, we got the great defense against a solid offensive team. When it's all said and done, edge goes to defense. Virginia, Gonzaga, and Duke. Man, the BBDI is going crazy. But I'm sorry, Dukies, I'm going with the Zags. Love their size, love Wiltshire. When it's all said and done, Kentucky, Gonzaga, Wiltshire with the ball. Can he shoot the three?
Villanova, Virginia, that was, he's going to call that. But he had Notre Dame up top, correct.
Kentucky celebrates, they go 40 and they win the national title.
All right, there's our segue. For me, it was a great UConn team from, I think that was the 2009 tournament. Yeah, you may remember some of the names, because I'm sure some of them have done well in the NBA. I'm still stuck in college, even in my young 40s to mid-40s. I'll let you figure that out. It's only a 2 or 3 numerical range. What keeps you young? That way, you can never be accused of having a midlife crisis because you never got old. In a way. Mature and responsible? Yes. But not so old, you know, the whole cliche and all that, and I could go on and on about that, but I've learned to try to keep these talking points and sound bites, the rants, rather. Okay. UConn, yes. Hilton Armstrong. Charlie Villanueva. Josh Boone. Denham Brown. Saved him a time and again into triple overtime. Who was the school? George Mason. I hadn't heard of George Mason before. You know, for us guys in this generation, the 40-somethings, the internet generation, as I like to refer to as 1993, is when the internet was just you connected to different research labs at other universities. So AOL 1.0 even wasn't around. And so, be that as it's may, not as much available at your fingertip resource information you follow. So a lot of times you see schools get into the big dance, especially back in the round of 32. My first experience with that was like, this little itty-bitty school called College of Charleston, what are they doing in the tournament? The little reminder to you guys, I always remind you must conduct yourself with class and dignity at all times. Going off on a rant when you're ignorant about all the details just makes you look foolish at the end. Yeah, it's hard to apologize your way out of that, but I was kind of going, I was like, what's going on here? I was totally like, Big East, the Big East back then. Absolutely. Georgetown, Syracuse. Not so much St. John's when new head coach who's going to be there now. The way he shot his free throws. You know who I mean. It's been a long week. My name recognition's kind of gone out the window. But you see these schools come up. Like recently, you know, we're all more familiar now, maybe, and I'm suggesting to you 20-somethings, you're more in the know than we would have been 20 years ago with these other schools. Why they get there, you know, you'd barely be lucky to know of these conferences ahead of time back then. Say in the 80s was what I'm talking about, early 90s, let alone all their member schools. And so what happens, they upset one of your schools that you boost for, UConn for me, and then they get to the next round, but they're not prepared to play their opponents. In this case, it was Duke, I believe. They get blown out. When UConn, that was another one of UConn's national championships to be added to their 4. They should have 5, frankly, in my opinion. That was the best team in the tournament. But George Mason had their day that day. Fortunately, in this tournament, I don't mean that fortunately, like, we don't like small schools. Actually, we do, but when you go through that for the first time, as I was suggesting, the cliche, it's like, that's the sort of thing that happens to other people. When it happens to you, you're like, you're not as keen on big upsets going on, because you know what that feels like. Because everybody gets excited when the underdog wins and whatnot. They never finish the job. It hasn't happened since, right, Villanova against Patrick Ewing, and that's not a small school, an underdog in terms of the strength of their respective rosters. But since then, I can't really think of anything. I don't consider Wichita State a small school anymore. All right, rest of the highlights coming up. Thanks for watching. No silly DUIs while you're out there celebrating the Final Four. Reminding you, sports and alcohol, they are joined at the hip.
Tom Izzo, the former players have so much ownership in their basketball program. That's when you have a culture. Yeah. And like the Draymond Greens and the Mateen Cleaves and the Magic Johnsons, they're picking up the phone and they're holding the players that they have now accountable. Mm-hmm. I coached at the University of Miami way back, and that's the way it used to be with Miami football. Like the guys that were there, all right, they understood the tradition and what Miami football was all about. When I look at Michigan State, these players right now, they understand and they hear from the former players about how hard you need to play, explaining what Coach Izzo is all about, explaining what a Spartan's about, and how competitive you need to be. I think it's one of the coolest things in college basketball.
You know what's cool to me is this is a guy that worked under Judd Heathcote, whose first 2 years he was 500. And then it started, the culture started to change. Not that it wasn't great under Judd because they won a national title, but I've known Tom since 1979. We coached in Division II against each other, and he's got the same grit and toughness that he had when he grew up in Iron Mountain, Michigan. Yeah. The beauty of Tom Izzo is that he's that gritty, grimy, tough, hard-nosed, blue-collar guy, and he hasn't changed. He's the same exact guy that Seth and I knew when we were all coming up in the business, and it's refreshing in a time where he's lost some key recruits now through the years that he took this group to the Final Four. Yeah. I think that's really cool because these guys...
and that's the thing. You can coach your players hard in the culture of college basketball today if they know you care about them as people first. The relationship that Tom has with his players is special, and you can see it by how they play.
Two of the most faced Wisconsin sat for last year's Final Four. Alex Poitras dunking over Sam Decker. Kentucky down. Andrew Harris made 2 of 3, so Wisconsin leads by 2, and then this shot. Andrew finds Aaron.
Make him put it on the floor.
Bombing that 3. Kentucky mobbing Harrison after Jackson misses what would have been the game winner. Kentucky, of course, advances to the final game. They would lose to UConn in the title game. Sam Decker and Frank Kaminsky, obviously, at that point, can need retribution this year, and they may get it. Now, Kentucky showed against Notre Dame, they are fallible. They can lose. What did Notre Dame do against Kentucky that made that game so close that Wisconsin's going to have to do?
Well, it's really interesting because everybody thought Notre Dame would come in shooting threes, and in point of fact, they were the best team in the country at shooting twos this year. And what Notre Dame did was use that spread offense, spread Kentucky out, bait them out to the three-point line, and then either drive it and dish or drive it and drive it because they got to the rim and they attacked Kentucky. They were aggressive. The interesting thing, Seth, about Wisconsin, everybody talks about the swing offense. That was when Bo had no players. You know what I mean? And no offense to guys that were really good players, but now what Bo does is he figures out which of those guys on the front line he can isolate against your worst defender, and he'll go at you early. I'll be interested to see where he goes with that. The problem is Kentucky has multi-dimensional defensive guys that can play both inside and out. Wisconsin can score, but I think Kentucky can make it really hard for them to score efficiently in the lane. I'll be interested to see if they do that.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is every single time Kentucky plays a game, what do we say? All right, what do you need to do to Kentucky? Well, here's what you need to do. You need to figure out how you're going to win with your personnel. Mm-hmm. Like Notre Dame almost pulled it off. With their personnel, they spread them out. Now, they didn't shoot a ton of threes, but you have to respect the three-point shooters, so it created driving lanes. And Darren Grant is a big physical guard who can get to the rack. When you come off those ball screens, they stayed home on the ball screen, which gave Zach August a chance to roll. Pretty good plan for their personnel. Now, the problem is, well, Ryan, how do you win with his personnel? Well, he does have some options. Invert your offense. You can bring Frank Kaminsky away from the basket. That's a good thing because you can now open up the lane to drive it. Now, I'm not sure this is a Wisconsin team that can drive it and rack it. But what they can do is by pulling Kaminsky away, they can attack that matchup on the baseline, whether it's Nigel Hayes or Sam Decker or one of those guys. So that's going to be the challenge for Bo Ryan, trying to figure out with his personnel, how do you beat Kentucky? Yeah. Pressure doesn't affect Kentucky, right? I mean, because...
No, I think...
Kentucky, but why do you think... Here's my philosophy. Tell me if I'm right.
Yeah.
Because they're not relying on one guy. Like most teams, pressure, if Chris Carter's having a bad game, which possibly could happen, all right? If he's having a bad day, bad shot sheet, someone else, you're out. How are you? Get in there. All right, and if Willie Cauley-Stein's having a bad game, Karl Anthony Towns steps up. Yeah. So the pressure isn't centered on one player, and Cal's done a great job of, like, playing the deck and playing the right card.
Yeah, and by the way, Willie Cauley-Stein did not play last year.
Right in the game.
And they still held Frank Kaminsky to 8 points. So it's going to be interesting. Bo's got weapons and he's got options, but Kentucky's got lots of answers.
What is it about these two coaches, Coach K and Coach Izzo, that makes them so effective in guiding their teams throughout the month of March?
I think preparation is number one. Number two, their passion, their emotion, the way they get their players to respond, to reflect their personalities is unique and special. When I talk about Coach K, Chris, and you think about 12 Final Fours, that's amazing. It's an amazing achievement to really catch the Wizard of Westwood, John Wooden. I've said it a number of times, and I'll say it again. People disagree with me, and I respect that right, but I firmly believe in all of coaching today, of any sport, Mike Krzyzewski is the best of all the rest. For Tom Izzo should be automatically a Hall of Famer next year. He's not on the ballot this year, but 2016, it would be an injustice if Tom Izzo, with 7 trips to the Final Four, a national championship, that he is not a Hall of Famer. He belongs in the Hall of Fame. The guy is quality in every way.
Boy, Coach K is winning the rivalry in a landslide. He's claimed 8 of the previous 9 meetings, including that 10-point Duke win in Indy earlier this season in the State Farm Champions Classic. Let's hear from Tom Izzo on his success.
Well, where did this one go? I don't know. You know, if I said it was the best one ever, I'll have my team calling, threatening me tonight. If I say that it was one of the surprise teams, I'll have Kalen and them calling me. If I say it was one of my favorite, they'll be mad at me for no longer than life. And Alan Anderson just texted me last night, and he was part of the 05 that I think if he wouldn't have got hurt, we had a chance to win it that year. But they were all kind of, you know, different in a lot of ways. But I think this was the most improbable. The answer is no. I wasn't really planning on working this late, but God, I love to work at this time of year. I just love to work at this time of year.
It's obvious. I mean, when you set the clocks forward and you spring forward, Tom Izzo begins to shine. No coach in tournament history has guided more teams seeded 5th or worse to the Final Four. He's 21-4 in the tournament on short rest, and he excels in close games, holding a 12-5 record in games decided by 6 points or fewer. Let's hear from his opponent in the Final Four, Coach K.
I've been so lucky to be at Duke for 35 years and in the ACC, and the great players we've had. And, you know, my past is not important right now. You know, my present is incredibly important. And just being with these kids and sharing this moment and this Final Four, I'm so happy. I'm so happy for them and to be with them. They are... Look, I'm not saying just because we've won. I've said it the whole year. I love my team. I love my team. They are a pleasure to be with, and as a result, they're taking me to Indy, which is kind of neat.
Look at this list. Are you kidding me? You're returning to the Final Four for the first time since 2010. Coach K ties John Wooden for most career Final Fours with 12, and he's won 8 of his previous 11 national semifinal game appearances. So the
better work cut out for us, but we better work cut out for us all year.
We're fighting for our lives right now.
Everybody's trying to eat.
They've been perfect.
They know what this moment is all about.
We are America's team tomorrow, Al. There's no question about it.
Looking forward to a great battle.
Swinging the wedge. Got it! A final dagger delivered by Sam Decker. Grant heads in, fires up a desperation three. No good! And Kentucky hangs on!
I know it was it. Ken made a shot, but I've seen him in that situation. Bang.
This improbable run continues for the Spartans. Michigan State is going to the Final Four.
We're not going to Disney, but we are going to Indy, and we're excited about it. They worked for it, they earned it, and we're going.
Justice Winslow with his mouth wide open after the three. Duke is going back to the Final Four.
We're off to Indy. That's a nice thing to be able to say.
And the Final Four is now